Mr. Secretary, there is an ongoing issue 2 months now in Portland, Oregon, where rioters every night go out and just create havoc. Your folks are there to protect the federal buildings. The mayor, the governor there say, you guys don't have any place to be there. You ought to get out. Why do you say, but we should be there? How do you respond to their insistence that federal police officers, leave?
Well, again, we're there to enforce federal law. And as you know, we don't do that by invitation. No other federal law enforcement agency does that by invitation. We need to make sure that we enforce federal law 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So in Portland, we are specifically there to guard federal properties, specifically a federal courthouse. It's the seat of justice there in Portland. And what we know is that courthouse has been targeted for 55 nights straight in a row. Violent criminals are attacking that courthouse and attacking law enforcement officers. We put up a perimeter around the courthouse recently. They have merged last night and the night before with power tools, trying to pull the fence over with vehicles. They are lobbing Molotov cocktails and other explosive devices inside the fence line, targeting law enforcement officers. So very, very violent, but the Department of Homeland Security is resolute in protecting that facility. We'll continue to do that because that's the job Congress gave us. It directs the Department of Homeland Security and specifically the Secretary to protect all federal properties. And we do this across the country. We protect almost 9,000 federal properties. But unfortunately, Portland is the only city where we're having this issue because we're not getting the full support of the local and state law enforcement or leaders directing their law enforcement not to fully support us. And that's very, very troubling.
I would have to think that in the offline conversations that your officers are having with local and state police agencies, they can't be happy that they've been told to stand down and allow these people just to do whatever they wish. Do those conversations happen? And is there great frustration on the part of local law enforcement when they're told to just look the other way at anarchy?
I believe there is. Again, our individual officers, Federal Protective Service there on the ground in Portland, obviously has personal relationships with other law enforcement there. So they're trying to coordinate as best they can. But again, Portland is making it very, very difficult. What they have done recently, the City Council has passed a resolution telling Portland Police Department that they cannot support, they cannot coordinate with federal law enforcement officials in the city of Portland. And as you know, you cannot be a fan of the administration, that's fine. But when you're directing specific actions like that, that becomes very dangerous for law enforcement.
You brought up a very important point, and that is that it's fine to have policy differences. You can have political differences, and those are historic. My gosh, I had them when I was governor for 11 years in a state at that time, heavily, overwhelmingly Democratic. But when a crisis came, everybody put politics aside. There were no parties. It was all hands on deck. Let's solve a problem. I don't understand this new thinking of putting politics above public safety, and I'm having a hard time understanding the justification for it. But I don't see this ending well if something doesn't change.
What we have in other cities is if federal property is targeted, what we have is that relationship between the federal, state, and local law enforcement to address that situation, to investigate, to arrest individuals, charge those, and indict them. And we just don't have that support in Portland. It's unfortunate, and it's really causing a very dangerous situation there in Portland. And I talk about that point because it's important. Whether we go to Seattle, whether we go to Chicago or anywhere else, we have that support with local law enforcement when it comes to protecting federal buildings. We don't have that in Portland. What we see every night between about midnight and 5 a.m. is anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 violent criminals taking matters into their own hand, attacking a federal building and then stepping back across the street, rearming, redeploying, and doing it over and over, night after night, hour after hour. And something needs to change. We need the state, we need the local law enforcement officials to say enough is enough, work with us. We can address this situation in a matter of hours. We just need to be able to do that in partnership with them.
When you arrest some of the leaders of these mobs, and that's what they are, these aren't protesters, these are mobs, violent anarchists, and they go to prison for 10 years, it seems like that's the only thing that might be a reasonable deterrence when some of these folks who just look at this as a recreational activity realize they could lose 10 years of their life in a federal prison over this. And I don't care what federal prison, that ain't pleasant.
It's exactly what we're doing. We're really pushing our Department of Justice colleagues, both the U.S. Attorney there as well as the FBI and others, to not only investigate, but to make those arrests and to prosecute. So since July 4th, which is where we see the big uptick in criminal activity there in Portland, we've made over 60 arrests, and we'll continue to do that. We're going to continue to hold criminals accountable for their criminal actions. And again, because we don't have that partnership there in Portland, the federal government is having to do that all on their own, which I think is very different than any other city in the country.
Mr. Secretary, before I let you go, a personal note. Happy anniversary to you and your wife who celebrate your wedding anniversary this week. And I'm sure she has not seen you in a long time. I hope she recognizes you with or without a mask. Good luck and thank you for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you back.